Dora and I are turning our backs on civilization. We have set our hopes on the Galapagos.
Why would people leave civilized world, come out to a rock?
Neither of us could have imagined the strange and sinister drama that would be unleashed upon us all.
What if paradise wasn't what it seemed? What if an untouched island, far from the chaos of modern society, could become the backdrop for one of the most twisted and deadly dramas ever to unfold? A tale filled with deception, passion, and betrayal. A place where escape turned into entrapment, and a quest for solitude became a fight for survival. On a remote island in the Pacific, a small group of settlers lived out a nightmare so strange and mysterious, it remains unsolved to this day. Join us as we uncover the chilling events of the Galapagos Affair, a scandal that turned utopia into a living hell. In 1929, a German doctor named Friedrich Ritter and his lover, Dora Strauch, set out on a journey that would forever change their lives. Friedrich was a disciple of Nietzsche, a philosopher who believed in human strength and self-determination. Friedrich hated modern society. He hated the noise, the crowds, the constraints of it all. So he and Dora left their old lives behind, sailing thousands of miles across the ocean to Floreana, one of the most remote and desolate islands in the Galapagos. Floreana wasn't a tropical paradise. It wasn't lush or filled with abundant food. It was arid, dry, and harsh. But for Friedrich and Dora, it was perfect, a place where they could live out their Nietzschean ideals and carve a life out of nothing. Together, they built a simple homestead. They lived off the land, growing their own food, collecting rainwater, and living in isolation. It was a tough life, but they were determined. Yet, cracks in their perfect paradise began to show early on. Friedrich was not just Dora's lover, he was her master, pushing her to live as he did. Even though she was in no shape to do so, Dora had multiple sclerosis, a condition that weakened her muscles, made it hard for her to walk, and caused her great physical pain. The hard work and unrelenting climate made her condition worse, but Friedrich, ever the stoic, dismissed her complaints. To him, weakness had no place in his utopia. 2 years passed with Friedrich and Dora as the island's only inhabitants. They lived in a kind of lonely, rough peace until 1931, when another German couple arrived, Heinz and Margaret Wittmer. Heinz was a former soldier, tough and resourceful, and Margaret was pregnant with their second child. They too sought to escape the grind of modern life, and when they heard about Friedrich and Dora's island refuge, they decided to follow suit. But the island wasn't big enough for the two couples. Friedrich had no interest in helping the Wittmers, and Dora, now resentful of Friedrich's coldness and harsh treatment, found a friend in Margaret. The two women bonded, despite the growing tension between their partners. The Wittmers quickly set up their own homestead, and despite Friedrich's initial hostility, they managed to find their place on Floreana. Yet even this uneasy balance was about to be shattered. In 1932, a woman who called herself the Baroness arrived on Floreana with two men, Robert Philipson and Rudolf Lorenz. She claimed she was going to build a grand hotel for tourists on the island and turn Floreana into a luxury retreat. The Baroness, whose real name was Eloise Verborn de Wagner-Bosquet, was a striking figure, charismatic, loud, and utterly dominating. She declared herself the Queen of the Island, and her two male companions, Robert and Rudolf, were her lovers. Now, the island was no longer a peaceful retreat for the reclusive settlers. The Baroness caused chaos from the moment she arrived. She boasted of her plans to build a hotel, but no construction ever happened. Instead, she and her two lovers spent their time wandering the island, making life miserable for the others. The love triangle between the Baroness, Robert, and Rudolf only added to the tension. The Baroness was a flamboyant and dominant figure who openly flaunted her unconventional love triangle, much to the shock of the more conservative settlers on the island. Robert, the physically stronger and more assertive of the two men, appeared to be the Baroness's favored lover, while Rudolf, weaker and more submissive, was increasingly humiliated and sidelined, and was often treated as a servant rather than a lover. The Baroness made little attempt to hide her relationships with the two men, and the trio lived together in a provocative and openly intimate arrangement. It's widely believed that they shared a bed together, with their intimate dynamic fueling the power struggle between the two men. Life on the island became unbearable. The Baroness had brought chaos, and with that chaos came fear. Dore wrote in her journal about the strange tension that hung over Floreana, how she could feel something dark and menacing looming over them all. And then, one day, the Baroness and Robert Philipson disappeared. No one saw them leave. No boats had come to take them away. They simply vanished, leaving all their belongings behind. Rudolf Lorenz, the weaker of the two lovers, claimed the Baroness, and Robert had sailed away to Tahiti on a passing yacht, but no one believed him. The Wittmers, who had grown wary of the Baroness and her manipulations, were suspicious of Rudolf's story. Friedrich openly accused Rudolf of murder. Rudolf, now the center of suspicion, became increasingly paranoid. He was desperate to leave the island, and soon after the Baroness's disappearance, he sold his few remaining possessions to the Wittmers in exchange for passage to the mainland. He and a local fisherman set off for San Cristobal, another island in the Galapagos, but they never made it. Their boat was found drifting empty days later. Rudolf's body, along with the fisherman's, washed up on the shore, half rotted from exposure. Now 3 people had mysteriously died or disappeared, and suspicions ran wild. Was it jealousy, murder, or simply bad luck? Friedrich Ritter, the man who had started it all with his dream of a Nietzschean paradise, didn't escape the island's curse either. In 1934, just a year after the Baroness's disappearance, he died suddenly from what was believed to be food poisoning. Ironically, he had always been meticulous about the food he ate, growing his own vegetables and avoiding meat, which he thought was impure. But it was a can of spoiled chicken that Margaret Whitmer had prepared that did him in, or so it seemed. Some believe that Margaret had poisoned him deliberately, though she denied it for the rest of her life. After Friedrich Ritter's sudden death, Dore was left alone on the island. Isolated and devastated by the loss of her lover, she found life on Floreana unbearable without him. Dore eventually left the island, returning to mainland Germany, where she lived the rest of her life in relative obscurity. Her health, which had already been deteriorating due to multiple sclerosis, worsened, and she spent her final years struggling with both physical illness and the emotional trauma of her time on Floreana. In the end, only Margaret and Heinz Whitmer survived the strange events on Floreana. Margaret gave birth to a child on the island and raised her family there. The Whitmers became the last living witnesses to the bizarre saga of the Galapagos Affair. Subscribe to Truth Revealed to stay intrigued and informed.